To change the subject to Airsoft. Now this is probably unreasonable for you to know this, but in 2010 there was a firearm policy working group that held a meeting or discussion about Airsoft, and the minutes are on the Attorney General's Department website. I have a copy here, and I'm happy to provide it to you if you'd like to have a look at it.
Thank you, Senator. That would probably be handy. I didn't bring those minutes with me, obviously.
Fair enough, yes. Actually, I'll give all of... There's three there if there's more need to look at it. I appreciate it's 7 years ago, so... I want to draw your attention to the last sentence of the final paragraph on page 1, and what that says is, many in the community are concerned that Airsoft promotes violence and may also serve as a screen for paramilitary training associated with illegal or terrorist activities. Now that view was expressed 7 years ago. I'm wondering if you can advise whether that remains the policy of the department.
So, Senator, these would be minutes of the Firearms Policy Working Group, so it's comprised of states and territories as well as the Commonwealth. They would have presumably had a discussion about the item, but the background comment only says many in the community concerned rather than actually putting a view of the department or of the states and territories. So I'm not sure I would characterise that as a view of the department at the time, rather than a statement that there appears to be some community concern with these issues.
All right. Well, in that case, can you advise me, the committee, what is the department's current approach to Airsoft?
So, Senator, I'm not sure we have a view as such. Airsoft does come up from time to time in discussions with the states and territories. I understand there are groups pushing to import more kind of airsoft firearms, so we're aware of it from that point of view, but I'm not sure we kind of have a view one way or the other. I guess we're aware of the issue with what I would say. Thank you, Senator.
Well, I asked Australian Border Force earlier, yesterday as a matter of fact, who determines policy, because airsoft are currently can't be imported, and I asked them what was the source of that policy that determines whether or not it can be imported, and they pointed the finger squarely at you guys. So I'm wondering if you can explain to me what the basis for that policy that informs Australian Border Force is.
Thank you for that question, Senator. There's a couple of aspects to that question. So the first point is to note more generally that firearms policy is something decided by states and territories. They have the constitutional responsibility for deciding on firearms. Obviously, we're a participant in those discussions on firearms policy, but it is formally for the states and territories to decide. You noted in terms of an import ban, but there is no import ban as such. The things which would be picked up on import would be airsoft ones which are fully automatic or that look like fully automatic firearms. So if you had an airsoft item that looked like an AK-47, then that would obviously be something which would be picked up on import, but there is no import ban as such, other than those types of airsoft items, i.e. those that are fully automatic and those that look like fully automatic firearms. Then the test under the regulations would be the police certification test. So if a relevant official within a state and territory certified that there was a legitimate purpose for importing the firearm, then that firearm could be imported. So there is no Commonwealth ban on airsoft as such. So I just wanted to set that out for the record. It would be a matter for each state and territory to decide which items it wanted to import, and that would be something which they would make as a matter of policy.
Well, nobody can import airsoft, so and it is the Commonwealth is responsible for import. So how can it be a matter of state decision as to whether they are permitted?
So, just to be clear, Senator, the only things that wouldn't be imported would be airsoft ones which are fully automatic or ones that look like fully automatic firearms. There is no Commonwealth ban as such on airsoft items other than those, provided that there is a police certification, it meets the police certification test. That's administered by the states and territories. So the states and territories could admit an item under that test. That's a matter for the states and territories. So there is no Commonwealth ban on airsoft items as such.
So what you're saying is, I think, if I interpret you correctly, is that the policy is if it looks like a fully automatic real firearm, and bearing in mind these things are made of plastic and fire little plastic pellets, bearing in mind, and so I think what you're saying is if the policy looks like a fully automatic firearm, it can't be imported, but otherwise it can be?
And that would be a matter for the states and territories to make an assessment, and I imagine they would assess the particular kind of item, whether there's a legit reason for importing it, how actually dangerous that item is, because although you have characterised some of them as just firing pellets, and there is kind of a range of different items. At the higher end, they can be used as a weapon. So there's a range of degradations in the types of airsoft items. They would presumably look at the application to import whatever kind of items and then make an assessment about, within their jurisdiction, is that something which would pose an unacceptable risk, or is there a legitimate reason for, and then make a decision on that basis. But it's not that the Commonwealth prohibits all of these at imports. It would be a matter for the state and territory to decide.
So if a state decided that firing little plastic balls was less of a health safety issue than paintball, which almost, I've never met anybody who would disagree with that if they know the two types of firearms. If a state came to that conclusion, how would then somebody who wanted to provide airsoft equipment for something like paintball matches import one, given that the Commonwealth won't allow them to come in?
So again, Senator, it's not that we wouldn't allow them to come in. So if they met the police certification test and the state and territory allowed them, certified them under the police certification test, then they would be admitted for import.
They would be if a state allowed them, then the Commonwealth wouldn't prevent them from being imported unless they're fully automatic?
Unless they're fully automatic or look like a fully automatic firearm.
Okay, unless they look like a fully automatic firearm. So what does a full automatic look like? Machine gun?
Yes, that would be a good example. So there are appearance-based controls. So obviously if you had something that looked like an AK-47 and you wandered around with it, that would be presumably a concern to the community, and so those types of items are banned at import. But other than that, if it met the police certification test, i.e. if a state and territory deemed that they could see a legitimate reason for it and that there wasn't too much of a community risk, then they could certify it under the police certification test, and then it could be imported. So
if a potential importer wanted to determine whether it passed or failed those criteria, the appearance test in particular, where would they look to determine what that test was?
I presume they'd have to discuss that with the relevant registry, so I'm not...
I thought you were talking about the Commonwealth having an overall policy in relation to not permitting things that look like full automatic firearms.
Sorry, on the input aspect, they can consult with us. So there's, they could send it through to the firearms team at the Attorney General's Department, and they could provide advice on whether it falls to appearance-based controls. In terms of the police certification test, that would be administered by the states and territories, so it'd be a matter of consulting them. So if you were looking to import in Victoria, we'd contact the Victorian Registry and have that conversation with them.
So we're getting close to the end of my line here, but I think what you're saying is there is a policy of the Commonwealth of not permitting firearms or airsoft that look like real firearms if they're full automatic. If they don't look like full automatic, then it's up to the states. So you're nodding. Hansard doesn't record nods. So if you could just confirm I've summarised it accurately.
Yes, that's correct, Senator.
Right. So my question then is, isn't there a regulation or a clause in customs regulations or import rules or something like that where a potential importer can say, well, what do you consider to be a full automatic? Because, I mean, there's a lot of firearms that could be converted to full automatic, and of course AK-47s, which is the instance you cited, can also be has a selective trigger on it, the real one, so that it doesn't always fire full automatic. So I'm just wondering, how would a potential importer be able to know what might be or might not be permissible?
If they're in doubt, they could consult with us. If we had any issues ourselves, we would consult with the AFP given their expertise in firearms. But on that aspect, if they consult with us in the first instance, we could get back to them with a view.
So there's no regulation that they can refer to in the first instance?
It's item 12 of Schedule 6 under the firearms regs, which are administered by the Department of Immigration and Border Protection.
Right. Now, in the interests of time, I'll just pursue a little bit further. In the European Union, which is generally regarded as not particularly friendly to firearms, they've excluded airsoft devices from the definition of a firearm because they're regarded as harmless. Japan, which virtually bans real firearms, have done the same. And many people regard airsoft as a harmless sport, and with children participating in them. Has the department's policy ever been reviewed since the statement I read out to you from the 2010, the Firearm Policy Working Group? Has anyone in the department ever looked at airsoft, to your knowledge?
Certainly, Senator, we look at these issues from time to time. We get lots of inquiries about airsoft, so it is something which we keep under active review. As I said earlier, there's a range of different airsoft items, ranging from the lower end, which you wouldn't consider a threat, to the higher end, where they can obviously be used as weapons. So high-pressured air can be used to fire a pellet at a high speed, which can be fatal to a person. So it depends on the item and how it's configured as to whether or not it's a danger to a person, and you would need to assess that with regard to the different items.
All right, I'm going to ask you to take on notice a request to provide evidence that there is such a thing as an airsoft firearm, which is potentially lethal, even potentially capable of serious injury. Could you take that one on notice and get back to me with advice as to what that constitutes? Because I've never heard of such a thing.
Sure, I'd be happy to, Senator.
Thank you. All right. All right, yes, okay. So I look forward to receiving that. I will investigate the regulation that you mentioned, and I'll have another talk to you at future estimates after I've had some feedback from the people in the states who are interested in this issue. Thank you for your time.